Hey, today I am here to do a review on the book Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. This is um, my third James Baldwin that I've read. I read his first novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, amazing, and this is his second novel. He had a collection of essays published in between Go Tell It on the Mountain and this called Notes of a Native Son, which I plan on reading. I also have read a short story collection called Going to Meet the Man, which was also amazing. And I recently purchased Another Country, which is another novel of James Baldwin's, which I plan on reading very soon. Actually, you could probably see it if you squint really hard and look over my shoulder. Nope. There it is. Over there somewhere. I don't know why that was so hard. Oh, right there. Um, wow, I wasted a lot of time doing that. Um, so Giovanni's Room is a novel set in 1950s Paris, whose main character is a young American man, white man. I forget if they ever call him by his name, and if they do, they only do it once or twice, so I really don't remember what his name is. Um, but he, I think, is in his early 30s. He's getting to the age where he's going to have to do something. Um, his dad lives in America, and is kind of there's a sense that there's a pressure there to come back and settle down and start doing something. Um, he has at the beginning of the novel. It's really the beginning is really the end, but he's standing in a house, reflecting on how he got to that point. We go through to his childhood, where his mother dies, and it's him, his father, and an aunt. And the aunt is kind of a really buttoned down individual, doesn't approve of his father's kind of drunkenness and shenanigans, and kind of him growing up like that. And then it transitions into him with his first experience with a man, because he is. It's kind of hard to explain. I don't know if you would say he is homosexual, but I don't know that he isn't bisexual as well, because he does sleep with women in the novel as well as men. And I guess you could say that he only does that as a cover, and he even denies to himself. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, it's his first experience with a friend. I believe they're like the end of high school. They have kind of an encounter. It's his first time sleeping with a man, and then he stops hanging out with the dude because it freaks him out. Um, so then he moves to Paris, and he kind of gives a backstory about how he proposed to his girlfriend Hella, who's from Nebraska or Minnesota or somewhere, and she's also living in Paris. She is kind of unsure, so she goes to Spain by herself to kind of figure it out. And so he's just kind of hanging out in Paris, and he is really hard up for money, so he hangs out with this older guy who gives him some money, but is also kind of a creeper. Um, and so they go to a bar, and at the bar, the bartender is this really attractive Italian man, and the older guy says, "Hey, invite him over to talk to us, because then he won't be creeped out if I do it." And so our main character goes over and he invites the bartender, who turns out to be Giovanni, and they head it off and start talking, and that's where they're introduced. They go out, they have a meal with Giovanni, this old creeper Jacques, and the owner of the establishment. I don't even know how to say his name. It's like Gayum, something. I don't know with a G. Anyway, and they all hang out. Then Giovanni and their main character go back to Giovanni's room, and they begin this kind of relationship, um, where they're together. And the main character, our narrator, he knows he's waiting for his fiance kind of to return and to find out how that's going to play out. He's also trying to get money from his dad, and he is in love with Giovanni, but at the same time denies that within himself as not real, or it's something that scares him. Um, And throughout it, they kind of run out of money. They start fighting a little bit. And so the main character or narrator gets a letter from his fiance saying that she's going to be in Paris. And he sort of just disappears from Giovanni's room. He just leaves. And that's where he's been staying full time. As he's wandering around, he meets up with a girl that he knows, who he doesn't find it particularly attractive. He tries to sleep with her. He does sleep with her. I think trying to exercise his demons with Giovanni, and that's kind of an awkward encounter for the both of them. And then his wife or his fiance comes back. She says she does want to marry him, and they start talking, and then they start to move in together, and they run into Giovanni and Jacques, and he has to try to kind of explain how he knows them and why Giovanni's so pissed off at him because his fiance is with him when they run into each other. From that point, he kind of abandons Giovanni. They run into each other a couple times. It's pretty bad and bitter. And then he sees a story. He decides to move. They decide to go on a little vacation, and the fiance, Hella, and our main character, to the south of France to kind of get out of Paris for a little bit. And right before they do, they see in the news that the owner of the bar has been murdered, and he knows, and Giovanni is the prime suspect because he was seen entering the house of the man right before closing time. And then from there, he feels really guilty. Our narrator feels really guilty, and he eventually sees that Giovanni's been captured, and he knows that Giovanni will probably be put to death. Because the owner of the bar, even though he is a creep and he was gay and sort of frowned upon in life, he came from one of the oldest names and richest families in France, and he was the last surviving member that could carry on the name and didn't have any heirs. So when he died, the press made a big deal about it, and so he knew the punishment would probably be pretty harsh. And he felt partly responsible for kind of ruining the relationship between Giovanni and the patron of the bar, because that relationship was kind of burned due to Giovanni's relationship with our narrator. At which point he starts to fall apart a little bit. The wife finally figures it out that he's homosexual. She takes off, and the novel ends with him, our narrator, sitting thinking about how Giovanni's going to die. And then it kind of closes. So this novel has a lot to do with homosexuality, but at the same time there are so many other themes in the book that are really subtle and important. And honestly, I think I need to read again and again to really get each layer of meaning. I heard that James Baldwin intended this novel to be mostly about American loneliness, and I get that. A lot of it is about loneliness and isolation and coming to terms with who you are, regardless if that's about homosexuality or other things. The writing in it is very beautiful. James Baldwin has a way of writing that is almost lyrical. There is a music to his prose, but not in a distracting way. It reads simply, but there is a musical kind of quality to his writing that I haven't experienced anywhere else. And honestly, just for the quality of the writing alone, James Baldwin's works are worth reading. If you've ever heard interviews of him speaking, his speaking is very similar, I think, to the way he writes. And it's really beautiful and honestly just a privilege to read. This is a really deep book, and it's kind of impressive because it comes in at like 170 pages, maybe. It's a very short book, but there is a lot of depth and psychological exploration that goes on in it. And honestly, whether or not, what your feelings are on his lifestyle, you have to respect the courage that it took James Baldwin, his second novel, to publish a novel this openly about homosexuality in the 1950s. And I've seen in an interview where he said he had to write it. He had to write it, and that even though reactions, some were bad, that it really made him free. There was nothing to hide. There was nothing to blackmail him with. You didn't tell him, he told you. And that is really a courageous position to take, especially in that time, and already, an expatriate black homosexual man in the 1950s. It's very interesting, very interesting, and just such a beautiful book, and the beautiful quality of his writing. I'm so excited to read more James Baldwin. Um, I encourage everyone to read at least one James Baldwin work, whether it's a short story like Sonny's Blues, whether it's Go Tell It on the Mountain, Giovanni's Room, and I've heard really good things about his essay collections like The Fire Next Time. Um, I've heard really good things about Another Country. So I suggest, I'm just scratching the tip of the iceberg, and I can't wait to read more. But anyway, I'm going to quit rambling. Giovanni's Room, really well written, amazing, very deep book. I will probably have to read it